Saturn is in Scorpio. It brings together a couple difficult qualities. Saturn, in general, doesn't do so well in Scorpio, as you could imagine. Saturn doesn't do very well in Mars-ruled signs. Of course, Saturn has its debilitation point in Aries because Mars, which is the ruler of both Aries and Scorpio, is impulsive. It's erratic. It's willful and trying to destroy something. This is the nature of Mars, is to destroy something. And we can be impulsive and willful, and when we feel like we deserve better, it's also very individualized, and we don't get the attention that we want or something, we can lash out and do something destructive or do something, in the smaller sense. Mars, as the ruler of both Aries and Scorpio, is trying to be powerful, individually powerful. But again, it's a matter of how we define ourselves as an individual that shows whether or not those signs and Mars itself winds up actually leading to individual strength and power, which is what Mars is trying to get to, or whether it's just more about some worldly version, which, let's be honest, most of us are not that enlightened. Our enlightenment comes through making mistakes. So when someone has a lot of planets in Scorpio or Aries, maybe they get to the point eventually where they realize, well, it's not all about me, but it's often through a painful reality because they sure as hell try to make it all about them. That's the way the planets work. We learn through making mistakes. And so with Saturn in Scorpio, Scorpio is where we try to make it emotionally all about me. It's all about me emotionally, my emotions, my feelings. Again, the nature of Mars wants that kind of emotional attention, and if the attention isn't the way we want it or enough of it, then Scorpio can do those things to get that emotional validation. Because again, Scorpio is where we tend to, we're aware of our lack of emotional control. We're aware of the fact that the things we love have control over us. And we're scared because, again, it's ruled by Mars, who wants to feel strong. And we don't have strength. Scorpio is where we realize our emotional vulnerability. The things we love control us, and we want to try to control them instead. That's the negative quality of Scorpio. Of course, the positive quality is through this dynamic, there's enormous self-control that's possible, enormous self-mastery. And Scorpio really puts on the illusion of self-control, even when they're out of control. To the world, they often put on this veneer of cool, calm, and control. Because if I let you see how out of control and vulnerable I am, you might use it against me. This is kind of the Scorpio facade at times. So when you bring Saturn into this mix, Saturn, of course, is about the tangible structure of the world and wanting to organize things and be protected and safe. And again, in Scorpio, it's a lot of emotional turmoil. So that emotional turmoil can undercut our structure, can make it so that the irrational fears of Scorpio and the tangible fear of Saturn comes together, because Saturn is where we're aware of the need to have money, to have good health, to have enough stuff and enough resources. And you bring that tangible concern, which is what it is, it's a tangible concern, into an area of irrational fear where we're naturally just a little stressed and worried, and it can kind of spiral, it can kind of snowball. Now there's also enormous power here. There really is. And again, I know I'm talking about it in sort of negative ways, but again, as I always say, every placement has enormous power and strength. What happens when you get difficult natural status, like Saturn and Scorpio is not naturally so easy. It just means that it takes more effort to get to the real sort of gem underneath it all. But it's certainly there. And of course, the gem would be that Saturn is, in the highest sense, both Saturn and Scorpio are about facing our fears, and Saturn is about practically managing them, not controlling, like by trying to control others, but literally having self-control and self-mastery. when we get good with Saturn energy, we stop trying to control outer situations. We know they take care of themselves, and we put enough effort to maintain our outer circumstances through our work and whatnot. But then we focus on managing our true fears, which is the fear of death, the fear of time passing, and we surrender and relax into a deep solitude. Silence is related to Saturn. Silence, meditation, stillness, solitude, these are all Saturn qualities. These are all Saturn strengths. They come from Saturn. And Scorpio also, in its deepest and most profound and enlightened sense, is also where we stop trying to attach ourself and attach our heart to something external. And instead of feeling the terror of something that we love having more power and control over us than we have over ourselves, we go into ourself and find the source of that vulnerability and that weakness. And so, when Saturn is in Scorpio, in the sky by transit or in a natal chart, these things can come together very favorably, rather than something that has us trying to control a situation that we can't, which is the negative quality of Saturn and Scorpio. It can be very cold, rational, manipulative placement if we're not careful, where we put up a lot of boundaries to try to freeze those waters, because again, Scorpio is water, where we're trying to stabilize our emotions, and Saturn is about a sort of cold, measured look. So you can literally take cold and water, and you can see where Saturn and Scorpio can really put on the deep freeze to just freeze that water so that it doesn't move. But that makes us cold, makes us impenetrable, makes it so nothing gets in. I'll show you, you can't hurt me, you'll never get in here. Right? So instead of experiencing our feelings through a flow of love and energy, we cut ourselves off with a sort of cold placement, or sort of cold stance. Again, in its highest sense, and it can definitely work this way, especially if someone, let's say that it's a transit and someone has a powerful Saturn in their natal chart, it can definitely lead to deep meditation and a deep sort of penetrating insight. Let's say in the natal chart they have the Sun there, or Mars there, or Jupiter, or a powerful planet in Scorpio, and Saturn is going through Scorpio. Again, that transit of Saturn through that house can bring out all that greatness, all that penetrating sensitivity. Because Saturn ultimately makes us very sensitive to whatever he's influencing. In Scorpio, we can be very sensitive to our own heart, to our own feelings. But we have to be willing to feel them. And again, one of the biggest problems with Scorpio is when we're afraid to face the chaos of our out-of-control feelings. What we tend to do instead of facing the terror, because it's terrifying. Scorpio is literally where we're terrified of the things that we can't control. We're terrified. It's like a mother who is terrified that her baby is going to die. It's like, I don't even want to think about that. Don't even make me think about it. And Scorpio can have that kind of disconnected, compartmentalized view. Like, well, I just love this person. I don't even want to think about what it would be like if they leave. I don't even want to think about it. I just need to do this to try to make them stay. And then, of course, that doesn't work. Because if you do that, if a person feels like they've been controlled, they're going to leave. And often this is how Scorpio learns these painful lessons. So again, once a Scorpio is courageous enough to actually face this fixation, obsession is the big thing here with Scorpio. Once they learn to face these external obsessions, become obsessed with liberating themselves, Saturn influence can be very powerful. It's not easy. And again, this is what you can glean from placements that are difficult, is that it just makes it difficult to do it. It doesn't mean you can't. And in fact, it might mean, I've seen many times where people who have Saturn and Scorpio have enormous spiritual insight and power, but it's come through pain. where people have had deep losses. And they've had no choice but to face it. No choice. It's like kill myself or sit here and face it. And it's facing deep, painful stuff. Around the late 50s, I've done more readings with people from the late 50s who had Saturn and Scorpio. There was Saturn, Rahu and Scorpio around that time, 58, 59. And I've seen some pretty difficult stories. And people just grow in enormous compassion as a result. So very, very interesting and powerful placement with Saturn and Scorpio.